occurred in Locust Grove, Oklahoma, June 13th, 1977. And I do want to point out that this case is actually a very significant case, not only for the state of Oklahoma, but also for the nation, as the results from this case changed the way that the Girl Scouts of America, as well as the Boy Scouts of America, it changed the way they do things. And they made new rules as far as safety goes as a result of this case. So without further ado, we're going to get into this. So June 13th, 1977, at Camp Scott, Girl Scouts camp near Locust Grove, Oklahoma, sometime between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., someone or more than one person came into the Kiowa unit. They killed and sexually molested the 3 girls who were sleeping in that number 7 tent. The killers relocated the bodies about 150 yards from the tent. The 3 victims' names were Michelle Gus, Doris Milner, and Lori Farmer. So 6 a.m., Carla White, Camp Scott counselor in the Kiowa unit, discovers the bodies of 3 of her campers dead on the side of the trail while she is on her way to the shower. So 7:30 a.m., several members of the local law enforcement are present at the crime scene, and the investigation finally begins. By 10 a.m., Camp Scott evacuated without telling any of the campers why they were heading back home after only one night at summer camp. And it was storming really bad that night, by the way, I just want to point out. Charter buses returned the girls to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they are met by their families with no explanation of why. June 13th, 1977, was the last day that Camp Scott was open. After nearly 30 years of hosting Girl Scouts, Camp Scott was closed and never reopened. So, June 14th, 1977, the wooden floor platform of tent number 7 is airlifted to a crime lab. The floor is covered in blood. The killers appeared to have attempted to wipe up the blood using towels and camp mattresses. Against the investigators' wishes, the press published that a tennis shoe print is found outside the tent and a different print was found inside the tent. So that's how much blood there was. The towels and clothes simply was not enough to soak up the blood. They had to resort to giving mattresses on the hope that the thickness of the mattress would soak up the blood. So June 15th, 1977, Sid Wise, Mays County DA, is publicly outraged that the press published the information about the shoe prints. A man is arrested 7 miles north of Camp Scott. He is living in his car at the time. He is questioned by the police and then quickly let go. The investigation turns to a ranch just west of Camp Scott, owned by Tolson Jack Schroff. He has stolen items from his cabin which may have connection to the murders. Investigators announced that highly trained tracking dogs will be coming to help from Pennsylvania. So the local Tulsa press quickly named them the Wonder Dogs. For the first time, Jean Leroy Hart is mentioned as a possible suspect. He escaped from Mays County Jail years prior to the murders and has been on the loose ever since. That's right, I did say years. Officials then officially announced that they do have shoe prints. And they also have fingerprints on the bodies, a flashlight, a piece of cord, and one single piece of duct tape as evidence. So finally, on June 16th, 1977, the Wonder Dogs finally arrive. It is determined that the killer or set of killers must have passed by the counselors in order to get to tent number 8. Eyeglasses in the eyeglass container are found. They belong to the campers in the Kiowa unit and one of the counselors. The medical examiner announces on June 16th that the 3 girls were not raped. June 17th, 1977, Jack Schroet, the nearby ranch owner whose house near Camp Scott had been burglarized the week the camp began, passes a lie detector test. Because of the media's misleading information, Schroff received harassing phone calls and threats. He had to be hospitalized as a result. Investigators announced that the 3 fingerprints on the girls' bodies were found. So, June 18th, 1977, Sheriff Pete Weaver announces that a murder weapon had been found. The DA, Sid Wise, and the FBI and the OSBI agents tell the press that they have no idea what Sheriff Weaver is talking about. UPI reports that the murder weapon is a crowbar and that there are several good fingerprints on the crowbar. June 17, 1977, a local Cherokee medicine man is rumored that he had placed a curse on the FBI tracking dogs and that they will soon die. Later, on June 18, 1977, one of the dogs dies from heat prostration. June 20th, 1977, to a complete reversal of the previous day's announcement, DA Sid Wise publicly says that there are several suspects in the case and that there are a mountain of evidence piling up. It is officially announced that they do have fingerprints on one of the bodies. On the same day, another wonder dog dies, suddenly running into traffic, and he was struck by a car. The dog was valued between $10,000 and $20 in 1977. On June 21st, 1977, Oklahoma Governor David Burren offers the help of the National Guard. In the manhunt, another suspect is added to the list. Law enforcement identifies him only as Mike. He apparently has been camping alone in the area near Camp Scott. It is believed he stole a hatchet and some supplies from a nearby Boy Scout camp in Garland. June 22nd, 1977, officials announced that pictures of 3 women were found near the bodies. Other officials told the press that the photos were found in a cave about 2 miles from Camp Scott. Sid Wise announces a total media blackout about the case. So you have to realize that up until this point, that because there was conflicting stories, the DA was saying one thing, sheriff was saying one thing, FBI was saying one thing, and the press was saying one thing, so everybody was saying different stories. So on June 22nd, Sid Wise just finally says enough with it, and he announces a total media blackout because he can't afford any more bad things to happen. June 24th, 1977, 200 members of law enforcement and 400 volunteers surround a 4-mile area near Camp Scott. They were supposed to be unarmed, however, many were. A few volunteers were even arrested on marijuana possession. Members of AIM, aka American Indian Movement, arrived to monitor the posse. So June 26, 1977, most all of the 200 lawmen who had came to the area to assist in the manhunt on this day. So they finally leave the area on this day. I apologize about that. So June 28, 1977, Sheriff Weaver says that there will soon be a $14,000 reward offered in the case. June 29, 1977, the FBI moves 40 agents into the area to help with the investigation officially. June 30th, 1977, Gene Hart's mother, Ella Mae Buckskin, tells the press that she is regularly being harassed and that Sheriff Weaver planted the evidence to implicate her son out of revenge for his jail escape years prior to the murder and the fact that he was still on the run and the suspect and still can't be found. July 1st, 1977, law enforcement officially leaves Camp Scott once again, saying that all evidence from the camp has been officially gathered. So July 6th, 1977, Oklahoma State Medical Examiner releases the autopsies on the 3 victims. OSBI Director Jeff Laird calls a press conference and announces that there are no fingerprints on the girls' bodies. He stated that what they thought was fingerprints turned out not to be fingerprints. When the press wanted more information about it, he elaborated no farther on the subject, simply saying that he didn't want to go any farther on the subject. Again, I feel like he just didn't want any more bad publicity for being wrong with all the misleading information, going on. So, July 29th, 1977, a private security team looking after Camp Scott sees what they think is a person in the woods. After coming back from investigating, they find a pair of Dennis Miller's shoes and socks wet in the bag on the steps of the camp's director's house. So, August 5th, 1977, the Tulsa World newspaper prints a front-page plea from Oklahoma Governor David Burren. Burren said he will use the authority of the governor's office and will take any steps necessary to assure the security and a fair trial if he will only give himself up. And who he's referring to is Hart, because Hart is still on a run. So they literally printed this huge article saying, Hart, if you come in, I guarantee that you will have a fair trial. So September 22nd, 1977, two of the families of the victims file a $3 million lawsuit against the Magic Empower Girl Scout Council. April 6, 1978, 4:15 p.m., a team of 8 OSBI agents, including Mike Wickerson, Harvey Prott, Jack Lay, Larry Bowles, Bud Osley, Larry Thurman, Don Sharp, and Rogers Chris, storm a house in a remote area at the southwest corner of the Cherokee County near Bunch, Oklahoma, which is approximately 45 miles from Camp Scott. Hart is arrested without incident. He is transported directly to the Oklahoma State Penitentiary at McAllister because he was already supposed to be serving a prison sentence there anyways. So they didn't waste no time with putting him in county jail. They just directly took him to prison. So after Hart's acquittal in the triple homicide case, he was returned to the Oklahoma State Prison at McAllister to continue serving the 300 years he had remaining on his previous sentences. He turned down all requests for interviews with the exception of one sole interview. Some of the suspects' previous crimes, this leads to him to being suspect number 1. So let's look at some of these, all right? So there are 2 rape convictions, 10-15-66, 3 different robberies, home invasion, and robbery of a woman in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Total 4 counts of burglary found guilty, parole violation, jail escape, the burglary. Okay, so let's look at the timeline for this, for his crimes in particular. So June 1st, 1969, Ronnie and Susan Furr, he hit their house. June 1st, 1969, he hits Eugene Letham's house. June 2nd, 1969, he hits Stephen Stewart's house. June 7th, 1969, he hits Tulsa PD officer Heather Campbell's house. His arrest conviction dates are September 25th, 1969 for Campbell, October 21st, 1969 for Stewart, December 9th, 1969 for Latham, January 20th, 1970 for Furr. This murder case is still unsolved, everybody, just so you know. So, yeah. Sorry, I was looking at something. So before I go any farther with this, let me state that we got to keep in mind that 1, the case is still unsolved, and 2, there's a lot of racial tension in this case. The fact that Hart was full-blooded Cherokee, the state of Oklahoma in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they had a lot of Native American protests, a lot of Native American things going on within the state. Also, Hart was known to have some mental disabilities as well, or was rumored. I can't say known. He was rumored by people to have mental disabilities as well. The sheriff was flat out embarrassed that he was on the run for so long. And when the FBI came into town to help, and he became another suspect, and he was still on the run, the sheriff was willing to do whatever it took to be able to get him. He was even offering money that he couldn't even back up to be able to pay for the catcher of him. I mean, he was just desperate at it. I just wanted to point that out so you would have an understanding of why the American Indian movement showed up, why the FBI showed up, and why the DA was so adamant about it, why the governor was employing the National Guard. I mean, this case is a huge case on so many levels. It really is. So let's look at the trial. By this point, Hart's supporters are defending him so aggressively that the victims' families need police escorts to the courthouse to keep them safe. The newspapers stated articles focusing on how terrible it was that the daughters who were murdered, they were being faced by Hart supporters and harassed by them on the courthouse. So the newspapers were already basically what this means is the newspapers were focused on, so Hart's supporters were naturally there defending and protesting his innocence. The newspapers' take on that was how terrible it was for the victims' families to have to see them supporting him at the front of the courthouse. That's what that really boils down to. So the trial turns into a news circus as the defense dismantles the prosecution's case. So how did they do that? Well, first, the bloody footprint in the tent was too small to be Hart's. The fingerprints on the flashlight was not a match to Hart's fingerprints. The swabs taken from the girls were not conclusive enough. They were similar to Hart's, but not guaranteed to be a match. 4, it is claimed that the hair was Hart's, but again, it only looked like Hart's hair. It did not mean officially that it was a match. They emphasized the possibility of evidence being planted from Hart. Evidence being implanted to frame Hart. Hold on 1 minute. So, hold on 1 minute, everybody. All right. So after hearing the evidence and how unclear it was, the jury took only 6 hours to deliberate. They found Hart not guilty of the crimes. So speculations, many believed and still do to this day Hart is guilty of the Girl Scout murders. A lot of evidence seems to be in support that Hart has an accomplice. People say that this explains why the footprint is not a match to Hart's. Also, why the fingerprints were not a match. It is hard to comprehend that Hart could murder all 3 girls on his own and manage to keep them quiet at the same time. People say it makes more sense that 2 people tied up Michelle and Doris. There are reports that knots used to tie the girls look differently. Evidence also showed that the attacks were not consistent between the girls. The girls were found 150 yards from their tent. This shows that they would have had to be carried out one by one. I ask people to understand that this was what local people felt like. People wanted an arrest from the little girl's murders. The accused was hated by law enforcement already. He had jailbreaks as well as previous arrests for sexual offenses. He was around the area at the time. The small town law enforcement felt pressure from the community and also from the nation, and hated that the FBI was involved in the case at any rate. It is, like I said, as stated. All right, hold on 1 second, guys. So after the trial, we're just going to get into that. I'm going to scratch that part. So after the trial, after the jury ruled Hart not guilty of the murders, he was taken back to prison. Remember, he escaped to serve the remaining 305 years of his previous sentences. However, after just 2 months back in jail, Hart had a massive heart attack and died instantly at the age of 35 years old. The parents of Lori Farmer and Doris Milner filed a $5 million lawsuit against the Magic Empire Council, accusing them of negligence, which resulted in the deaths of their daughters. So, they argued the threatening note found by the counselors should have been investigated, and that the girls were unsafe due to the location of their tent and how far it was from the counselor's tent. The jury ruled in favor of the Magic Empire Council, therefore deciding that the deaths did not occur due to negligence. So in 2008, bodily fluids from inside the tent were put forward for DNA testing with more advanced forensic tech analysis. The DNA were found to be too damaged for testing. So in 2017, Sheriff of Mays County set up a fundraiser to raise money to carry out DNA testing again with more advanced methods. They raised $30,000. However, nothing came of it. We're going to look at some highlights as well. And by the way, that was from, I got some of that from Talk Murder with me. So we're going to look at some highlights. So Gus and Farmer were bludgeoned to death. Milner was strangled to death. All 3 girls were raped and beaten. So the second thing I would point out is Garth Scott was on this 700-acre property built in 1920. Or Camp Scott was on a 700-acre property built in the 1920s with funds from the Girl Scout cookies. After the murders, the camp was abandoned in 1977, officially closed. So fact number 3 to consider is, due to Hart's Cherokee ancestry, race became a central and consistent part of the investigation. Some local Cherokee and other Native Americans believe that Hart had been unfairly scapegoated because of his background. According to author Kant Franz, some Native Americans helped Hart while he was on a run. The fourth thing to consider is Hart's sister, Tammy Foreman, believed her brother was innocent despite his prior history of committing sexual crimes. The question of his innocence divided local residents thoroughly. And in fact, a lot of residents still, from what I understand, still are in dispute on whether or not he's guilty or not guilty, even though he's dead. It's still kind of a heated topic within that community. So the fifth thing to consider is the crime remains unsolved for over 40 years. Sherry Farmer, mother of Lori Farmer, stated, "It still remains an open wound for me that just keeps going in and out." So when we're looking into this, why would I state how important this case is? Again, one thing I want to point out that this did occur in Locust Grove, Oklahoma in 1977. Now, the time period is what I would want to point out more than anything else is the time period. Because like I said earlier when we're going over the research material, the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, well, basically I would say honestly from the 30s to the early 80s was very heated arguments within the Native American community in the state of Oklahoma. So you have that aspect, especially since Camp Scott was on Cherokee grounds, from what I understand. And Hart was a bona fide full-blood Native American, and he was also like, you know, he could do all that camping, and that's how he's able to survive in the wilderness. Now, you also have other aspects into it. He was already being tried for those sexual crimes that I talked about before, as well as the breaking and entering charges or burglarizing charges. And on his way to jail, he had escaped. This flat out just ticked off the sheriff, man. This sent him right off the edge. It didn't matter that he was kind of considered slow. All that mattered to the sheriff at this point is simple. He got away from me. He's basically being looked at like a fool, you know. And on the same token, you had the investigation going on. You had the Girl Scouts involved with it. The Girl Scouts of America involvement in it. So, now you have the Boy Scouts of America involved in it too. You have both of these organizations tied up into this thing. All right? So, this murder actually changed the way that the Boy Scouts of America and the Girl Scouts of America allow their campers to operate. They actually started investigating a lot more security protocol for our kids whenever they join the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts as a direct result of this case in Oklahoma. And also another thing I would point out is, like I said in the research material, the sheriff was extremely upset that the governor sent in the National Guard and the FBI and all that to help with the investigation. He felt like him and his good old boy network was fully capable of finding the killer. Now, as we stated before, there were numerous suspects arrested throughout this case, all found to be innocent. Now, again, you do have the aspect, and us in the true crime community can understand why some people in the community would honestly say, hey, there's an accomplice. How else could this little guy, because when you look at Hart, I actually attached photos on my business page of this case, where you could actually see. We go through on Working Class Thoughts Facebook page. You could click on the case photos where I actually have all the newspaper prints, articles of Hart, FBI, the sheriff. I have pictures of the crime victims, the crime scene, photos, so on and so on. And you can see what I mean. He is a little guy. So the idea that such a little man could break into, or that was the other thing, by the way. Let me retract that. He could actually go past the counselor's tent or cabin, right? And managed to get to these little girls' tent without waking up the counselors. He managed to get them under control. Okay, 3 girls under control at the same time without waking up anybody. So this is something that a lot of people keep bringing up. That's almost impossible for it to be done. You know, that's aside from the fact that he had to carry him so many yards away, like we went over. I mean, this guy had to carry it masses away, like far away from the crime scene. That's phenomenal to think about. And that's why so many people say there's got to be a partner. The people want an arrest they want Hart to be guilty of it, even though he's dead. They still want Hart to be guilty of it so bad that they still, to this day, say we need to find the other suspect, his accomplice. They never say they never say the true killer. They always say the accomplice with the killer, because they're so dead set that Hart did it. Myself, looking into the case, I don't fully think that he did this. I think it's a possibility he did it, because like I said, you know, when it comes down to sexual cases, I don't want to get into the psychology of it all, but there is a very high likelihood that he would be a reoffender. So, is there a possibility of it? Yes. The main reason why I don't think that he did do this crime is because he was already facing such a lengthy prison time that he was already on a run for. You know what I mean? He was already on the run from the police. So I don't know if anybody out there has ever been running from the police before, but when you're running from the police, especially when you see the FBI get involved with it and National Guard, I'm talking about later on, but when you're running from the police on that level, I really highly doubt you're going to go kill a bunch of girls when you're running from the police. Now, let alone, even if he did do those crimes, even if he did do it, when he saw the FBI, the National Guard, the OSBI, and everybody else that was involved with the case, why did he stick to that small community? Some would argue that he stuck to that community simply because of the fact that he is Native American and had ties to the community and he knew the land, so he could live off the land out there. A lot of people would argue that. I would argue the fact that if I did a crime like that and I was on a run, I would get as far away from the state as I possibly could as fast as possible and as sleek as possible. So that's the reason why I think there's a possibility that he did not do it. I think that the sheriff of the community was so focused on Hart that the true killer managed to get away. In the crime scene photos I was referring about that you could have access to on my business page on Facebook, Working Class Thoughts Facebook, you can actually Google it and it'll pop up, I think. At least I hope. If it don't, let me know. But anyways, when you go into photos and you click this Girl Scout murder case, like the photos, you'll see a note that they found. Earlier when we were going through the notes, they said that Hart was found with eyeglasses and found with pictures of the victims, right? And notes that the victims had written. So he was found with the victims' belongings in a cave. But on that cave, there was another note written on a cave. And I don't want to spoil it for you. So, go and look at that. Because in short, it basically stated that, hey, the true killers were here, you fools, at the end of it. And Hart didn't write that note. I just want to throw that out there. But he was found with those belongings. And that's why a lot of people wonder, if he didn't do the murder, why was he found with the glasses? And he was found with a lot of different glasses, as a matter of fact. And I can't answer for that, honestly. I can't answer for why he would want to stay in that area when he was on a run from the police in the first place. This is what leads a lot of small town folk to say that the Native Americans at the time were helping Hart being on a run. Because he just simply was able to stay on a run so easily for so long. This wasn't like a guy on a run for like a month. Hart was on a run for multiple years before he was caught. Multiple years before he was caught. I said multiple now. Multiple. And he was on a run for multiple years, and he lived in a wilderness. But I do want to point out that the reason why he was found not guilty of this case was because the shoe prints that was found inside the cabin, remember earlier that was so saturated with blood, and the shoe prints that were outside were found to be too small for him. That's a fact. It was found to be too small to be a match for his. And the fingerprints that they were referring to was also found to be not a match. The DNA was found to be too corroded for use. That irritated the sheriff's department. I mean, for the fact that, 2017 and 2018. The fact that he's still adamantly trying to fight to get that DNA proven. I mean, he wants Hart that bad because this is something on that town's history I can imagine being unsolved that's just eating at them. Because at first, this was a horrible, tragic crime. And that horrible small town crime turned into a national tragedy. A national tragedy. And it put a lens on how the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts operate with our kids. It put a very big magnifying glass on that. And I do want to point out again that I did state that they still haven't found a real killer to this day. To this day, they have not found a real killer, and it's 2019. So the last attempt that they had at finding a killer was whenever they offered that reward in 2018 to send off for that DNA test to be found, because the sheriff and the community, the sheriff and the DA were hoping that by 2018 that the forensic technology that the FBI had was so much better than what was around in the 70s, and it by far is, that they could find evidence proving Hart's guiltiness of these crimes, like evidence pointing it that he did do it. But it's been so long that the evidence was found to be too corroded to use that the DNA samples were basically, in a roundabout way, worthless. So you got to keep that in mind too. And again, I do want to keep going back to this off and on, that I am actively looking at small towns across the globe, not just the U.S. There is some stuff that's come across that people have sent to me, and I'm still going to work on more. And again, this is a podcast by Mike for Working Class Thoughts. So I want to throw that out there. And I am available on iTunes, Google Play Store, as well as numerous other podcasting stations. On Facebook, on Instagram, Snapchat, and here on YouTube as well now, since I've decided to do this way. Now, getting back to this case before I get off track. So there's a lot of country areas in this too. That's why they had to bring in those dogs. The wonder dogs that they were talking about, I have pictures of those in those crime photos as well. And the area, I think, is just so wilderness that the dogs had a hard time. There was so much time that passed in between the time that law enforcement was brought, left, and came back. Because they would leave and come back, leave and come back. There was so much time that passed that the evidence basically was washed away. But this is a horrific case. And if I will put out a word of caution, as any crime scene photos go, of whatever, because you will see like pictures of the floors being soaked in blood, steps, etc. But that's normal stuff if you're part of true crime. But I do want to put that out there. Again, there was a lot of blood. These are horrific murders that happened to these 3 girls. Were absolutely horrendous. And I do hope that at some day the killers will be brought to light to who they actually were. And I do find it upsetting in a way that the prime suspect died before anything could happen. He died of that attack in jail. So, again, this has been Mike for Working Class Thoughts. Today's episode has been on the Girl Scouts murder. Again, if you have anything for me, please feel free to send it my way. And if you feel it's a small town murder, controversy, occult, anything that's out there, anything that's unique, anything that you feel that makes your town unique, something that makes your town stand out from the rest, that you think that people in the whole world would like to know about your town, send me those type of stories and I'll start looking into it. Here in a couple months, the shows will be able to start moving a lot faster than what it has been. I'll be honest with you, it's been moving at a snail rate right now. I'm aware of this, and I have every intention of picking up the pace as far as the episodes go. And I also have every intention of the video quality getting better as well. So with that said, you guys, this has been on video. And for my Anchor listeners that are listening right now as well, again, you guys can find me on YouTube as well underneath Working Class Thoughts Online Library. You can find my channel that way, or you can even just type in Working Class Thoughts and my channel will pop up. For my Anchor.com listeners, my iTunes listeners, and Google Play Store listeners. You can also find me in video format on that way. But I wanted to link up the two at the same time so all my listeners could listen at the same time. So again, no matter where you are in this globe, in this great big world of ours that we live in, no matter where you are, no matter how small town you live in, if you think that people out there would want to hear your story or a story that you know about, hold on one sec. Or a story that you know about your community that you think that everybody would want to know about, feel free to send it to me and I will definitely spend some time in researching into it. We have a lot of ground to cover though. I got some episodes coming your way that's going to be pretty unique. For my listeners that's been listening on audio for a while, for about a year now, that have been asking me if I'm going to get into political commentary or political like-minded subjects, matters that they're talking about in the debates. I tended to do that a little bit off and on last year. I would pick different things they're talking about and basically go into detail about those subjects. I am planning on doing that still, hopefully. But I have promises that I have made that I have got to keep with my listeners that have sent me requests to do episodes and things to look into. And I promised them I would. So I'm going to, just like with anybody else, I mean, if I gave them my word I was going to do it, then that's what I intend on doing. So I'm going to look into some more of these episodes that have been requested of me. And if you have any more that you would like me to cover or that you think other people would want to know about, like I said, feel free to send me a message either here on YouTube or on my Anchor.com site or on my Facebook, Working Class Thoughts on Facebook.com. Or, sorry about that. Damn, that was a tongue riddle. Anyways, my Facebook Working Class Thoughts page. So If you have anything for me, feel free to send me that. All right. Without further ado, everybody have a great day.